The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I will say that yesterday was a very, very, very busy day for yours truly. You guys want to know what I did yesterday? No, you don't. You don't actually care. But I'm going to tell you anyway because, you know what? I got a show here and I can do what I want with it. Yesterday, I recorded the roughly 50 minutes of the Reverse Chronological Lightning Round Monday show. The segment with our buddy Lucas Johnson, which was actually recorded late the night before. So we'll talk about it as a 24-hour stretch. Late the night before, Sunday evening, around 9 o'clock here on the Pacific Coast, we talked to Lucas Johnson about the Jimmy Butler trade and what it means to the Philadelphia 76ers. First thing Monday morning, recorded the 50 minutes of the Monday show, and then it was just this insane onslaught of things that needed to be taken care of. Had to re-edit some stuff, make sure that things fit into different time constraints. We talked to... Well, we had the premium show, the weekly lineup show, talked to Ryan Buchanan of the Blazers Edge, talked to Canis LeVert, our guy Eric Goldman. That's going to be coming up later on today's podcast. Did some interviews, did a Lakers podcast yesterday. That's about an hour long, all told. And finally, this is like complaining about the wrong things because bearing in mind, of course, there was a time in my life where as a baseball play-by-play guy, I was on air for 3.5 hours straight every day. But I think yesterday was the first time in a really long stretch where the number of shows I did all rolled together was actually longer than a baseball game, and I'm tired. The one thing about doing baseball, and I know this is not what you guys tune in for, but the one thing about doing baseball games is that it's all very much a nice, slow, it's like a waltz. You're just three-stepping your way through the ball game. You're doing the voice goes down, the voice goes up, you're telling stories, you're talking, then you get excited every once in a while when something happens on the field. With doing podcasts, with doing this sort of canned shows, you're at maximum energy all the time. There's sort of no part of this show where I'm just settling in like this and talking to you like a normal human being. This is all presentation. And there are no commercial breaks. Yet. I guess I could take one if I wanted to. You'd never know. I just hit the pause button. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, everybody. I am Dan Besbris. This is, of course, now a Dash Radio show. That's right. We are freshly in. We're new members of the Dash Radio family on the Nothing But Net channel of Dash Radio. Thanks to those guys for getting us looped in. Probably could have gotten that going earlier. This is my own fault. Just some technical concerns on my side that they addressed. They've been awesome about it, and so we're off and rolling now. You can follow all of the above parties on Twitter. Not surprisingly, me, I'm the easy one. I'm just at Dan Besbris. That's what we've been doing for a long time. Hoopball, that's our benevolent overlords. Hoopball, hoop-ball.com is the website. At Hoopball Tweets or at Hoopball Fantasy are the two Twitter handles. The Hoopball Fantasy one is the news feed. Hoopball Tweets is sort of like the big umbrella, large news stuff. NBN-Radio, Nothing But Net is what that NBN stands for. NBN-Radio is the Twitter handle of Nothing But Net Radio, and then _radio is the Twitter handle of their parent company as well. So pretty cool. We got a new outlet. More of you will be finding us, and to those that are finding us now on Dash for the first time, hello. I'll give you the Uncle Leo treatment. Hello, everybody. It's good to have you aboard for this Tuesday Fantasy NBA Today edition. What's coming up on today's program? We're going to take a look at the Monday night boxes. But again, it's not about doing every single game individually. It's about storylines, and we're probably going to end up getting stuck on that Brooklyn-Minnesota game for a little bit because, well, something awful happened in that game. And we will talk about that shortly. So storylines from Monday, we've got Eric Goldman of Canis LeVert coming up on the podcast. Going to tell us a little bit about what this all means, the Jimmy Butler trade from the Minnesota standpoint, the team getting more functional players back. That's always the one where you got a little bit of nerves cooking in your fantasy belly. Who's going to actually have playing time? moving forward because Dario Saric, Rob Covington, both those guys deserve to play some at the very least. Whereas, yes, obviously Tom Thibodeau wanted Jimmy Butler out on the floor for 48 minutes a night, but understanding that that was not generally the case and it was more like mid-30s and more like mid-50s to 60 coming back, someone's going to lose some playing time. Eric has some thoughts on that. We're going to pick his brain on the Minnesota side. We also have some news on the DFS side here at Hoop Ball, and I'll get into that partway through the program. You guys don't need to listen to me yammer on about anything else here at the beginning of the show. So let's start looking at the Monday stuff. The storylines from Monday. I didn't assign any homework yesterday because on paper, this seemed like it was setting up to be a fairly boring fantasy card. And by all accounts, it was, with the exception of massive injury news in that Brooklyn-Minnesota game. So let's rip through some of the stuff that's a little bit less interesting. Orlando-Washington, the only storyline out of that ball game is the swooning of Otto Porter and the relative emergence, yes, of Jeff Green. But no, you're not buying either of those storylines because Jeff Green does this once a year. Every freaking year. And every freaking year we pick him up and then drop him a week later because that's just what Jeff Green does. When you take 7 shots and have 18 points, that's not a sustainable number. It's just not. His cockeyed release on those 3-point tries, it's just not going to go in that many times. He had 4 3-pointers, and he went 6 out of 7 in this game. That's as hot as you can be. The 6 rebounds, not sustainable when Dwight Howard gets up to full speed. The 4 3-pointers, definitely not. 2 steals and a block, definitely not. Although I will say, when he's out on the floor for 25 to 30 minutes, which not the case last night and won't be the case moving forward, he actually can get you a steal and a block. He still has some athleticism in him. But no, you're not buying into this one. And Otto Porter, who now I almost feel like we need to go back and talk about the pendulum effect, was super overrated this year after being super underrated the previous 2 seasons. He was a guy that I targeted hard in fantasy drafts last year because people weren't buying the really strong season from the year before. I got him in a bunch of spots, and it was great. It was joyful. I threw a ticker tape parade for myself. This year, everybody caught up, or so they thought. He finally was ranked inside the top 25, even inside the top 20 at some places, when all the factors were pointing the other way. The addition of Dwight Howard was going to impact him severely on getting better looks at the basket and rebounding. And then on top of that, and this is what we didn't see coming, the dysfunction level in Washington was such that he's just getting squeezed. He's 4th, 5th in line most of these nights. So right now it feels like the sky is falling if you have Otto Porter on your fantasy team. I understand that. He's not going to be a top 20 guy. That was a gross overestimation of where he can end up this year. It's been a rough ride. He's played 23 minutes a game over the last 3 games for the Wizards. That's not good. On the season, though, in 9 category formats, he's still a top 60 guy right now. And this seems like almost legitimately it couldn't be any worse. Could it be any worse? He's had like 2 games where you look at it and you're like, oh, that was a pretty good game. And then every other night out, you're kind of like, well, you know, he survived. He survived. He had 6 points and 5 rebounds, 2 steals, and, you know, he didn't turn the ball over, and he had a 3-pointer. The magic of the 9-category format is that a guy turning it over half a time per game, if you're serviceable to okay in any other statistical categories, you actually become fairly useful. His shooting percentage is down right now at 45%. That'll likely come back up a little bit. And then just by all accounts, he's just not on the floor as much as he has been. I think those change, and I think there's an opportunity here because the production doesn't match up with the eye test. The rank of Otto Porter, he's number 56 in 9-category formats, and obviously he's way lower in 8-cat where turnovers don't matter. The rank for Porter doesn't at all match up with the eye test. The eye test says this guy's barely on the floor and he's not doing anything when he's out there, which means you can probably get him for a successful late rounder right now. You could probably throw out like, I don't know, who's a successful late rounder that I was talking about a lot? Evan Fournier, who right now, the numbers for Fournier, this is another situation where the numbers don't completely match up with the rank. He's ranked number 79. He's 2 rounds behind Otto Porter, but if you had watched each of them play recently, you'd be hard-pressed to convince me that Fournier was not the far superior player. And to Evan's credit, over the last couple of weeks, he has also been better. He's been number 59 over 2 weeks, which is better than what Porter's been over those 2 weeks. So, yes, by all accounts, there is a slight edge on one side. But Fournier's missed a lot of shots. His percentages have not been good so far this year. He's been fairly isolated to points, assists, and steals on the season, and his turnovers are high. Needlessly high, by the way, although at least there are some assists involved from that wing position. But, I mean, this is a guy where you could probably throw him out there and you might even get a bite. So, no, I'm not saying expect Otto Porter to bounce all the way back to top 20, but top 50 is very reasonable when things have gone this poorly, and he's just outside of the top 50. The New Orleans-Toronto game, I'm sure everybody's going to wonder why I'm still so high on Danny Green. Well, foul trouble, ladies and gentlemen. This is a weird stretch for him, and this does tend to happen with Green, but yesterday's game, he didn't lose minutes because other people were better than he was. He lost minutes because he picked up his second foul after 6 minutes. He picked up his third foul, and he'd only played 10 minutes. He picked up his fourth foul, and he'd only played 14 minutes. And then, yeah, he got to finish out the ball game. He played some minutes in the fourth, but by that point, you know, he's not going to be the focal point. The game has slowed down a little bit. Green gets most of his stuff in transition, and that part of the game was done. So super low usage and foul trouble. You know, looking around, it wasn't like Delon Wright stole his minutes. He only played 16 yesterday. And Toronto got smoked, P.S. So, yeah, I'm hanging on there. Jonas Valanciunas had a rough one. Kyle Lowry had a rough one. You knew the shooting percentage wasn't going to hold for him forever. It's going to be a really good season for Kyle, but, you know, not going to shoot like 49%. Pascal Siakam, meanwhile, is just destroying people. 22 in this one on 8 out of 12 shooting, 4 of 4 foul shots. He's come along a lot quicker than I expected this year. I figured if he could get the offense to come around a little bit, then things would be improved, but suddenly he's like world beater. His offense has made an insane leap. But they lost, so whatever. Drew Holiday was great. Anthony Davis was great. Etuan Moore got super hot in this one. Julius Randle missed some free throws, as per usual. Points and rebounds, that's his go-to. Anyway, at this point now we're looking at a box score. Etuan Moore is one of those late-round guys, by the way. We've talked about him 1,000 times, but just for a quick recap. Philly-Miami, I'm not even going to pay attention to the Philly side because, well, Jimmy Butler is coming to town and things are about to change. It is worth pointing out, though, that Wilson Chandler got the start and Mike Muscala ended up playing 27 minutes off the bench. Does that continue as Chandler gets healthy is the real question. Is that going to end up being basically a timeshare at the power forward spot? Does Muscala log some of his minutes at least at the center position? He actually has a little bit of upside. Muscala does. Because we've seen him hit the threes and get a few defensive stats before. He took 11 shots yesterday. I mean, is there a world where he could actually be like the fourth scoring option on this team? Probably not. Probably not. But Markelle Fultz looks terrible. Poor kid. Jimmy Butler's not going to help that situation. Wilson Chandler is an old man. I just don't think he has it anymore. So there's a reason to keep one eye on Mike Muscala going forward. We'll put him on our homework assignment list for their next ball game. Miami is just not very good. They suffer from what we've talked about before, stagnation syndrome. They just haven't made any moves in a couple of years. They have the same crummy, middling roster. I just don't think they have much in the tank at this point. They're like, well, what are we playing for? The 8 seed? Out east? What's the point? Like, we need a superstar. They needed to do something to get Jimmy Butler, and they didn't do it. And maybe in the long run, that's better for them. But in the short run, that full season under wager feels pretty good here in the early going. Long way to go, though, obviously. Hassan Whiteside, foul trouble. Foul trouble is such a thing this year with these stupid new rules where nobody can touch anyone. Idiotic changes. So many free throws this season. I'm sure that's exactly what the NBA was looking for when they implemented the you can't touch offensive players stuff. I hate to be like the old man yelling at the cloud on this, but this is a terrible change. There's so many free throws. Let people defend a little bit. They didn't really need to change. This is like they were trying to fix a problem that wasn't broken with that one. And now instead of just offensive players having a little more trouble getting to their spot, it's just foul shot parade. Just foul shot parade. There's 72 foul shots in this game. Philly took 39. Miami took 33. Brutal. Brutal. Nobody wants to see that. You know what the alternative here is? If you want all these foul shots and free throws, you got to get rid of the foul out. You just have to dump it or raise the number to like 8 instead of 6 or even 7. Because I think teams are tired of having to put their good players on the bench or even decent players on the bench just because they got called for some stuff. Wayne Ellington is a guy to keep one eye on. I do believe that Dwayne Wade coming back from the birth of his child will knock Ellington back below the cut line. Right now, Goran Dragic, if he gets healthy, adds one more useful body to that team, but it's basically been Whiteside, Richardson, and Magruder to this point. I'm a little worried about Magruder just because of all of these bodies coming back. But keep an eye on Miami. This will be a team we watch to see how the minutes shake out. Just such a big split on everything yesterday. Aside from Josh Richardson and Goran Dragic, it was sort of tough to get a feel. And just like medium usage for almost everybody except for Dragic. At least Josh Richardson is awesome. At least we got that. Phoenix, Oklahoma City. We were watching TJ Warren and Rashawn Holmes on the Phoenix side. Warren's rolling here, guys. Remember we told you that he had a chance to be fairly useful? Well, he's exceeded that now. TJ is inside the top 45 on the season in 9-cat format. He's shooting 50% from the field and 91% at the free throw line. It's crazy. He's always actually been a very good field goal percentage guy. He takes a lot of mid-range shots, and he's pretty good at hitting them. In fact, over his career, he's exactly a 50% shooter, right on the nose. But what he's done this year is he's actually increased his three-pointers without the field goal percent really suffering. His free throw percent is up. And since he's been inserted back in the starting lineup, he looks like the guy we saw last year, which was on pace to be like a top 60, top 65 guy. Well, plus the three-pointers, now he's a top 50 guy. I don't know if that necessarily is going to hold all season long, but he looks like a guy that's set up to have a really nice season all of a sudden because Phoenix realized Ryan Anderson is too slow to play basketball. So that's pretty good. That one seems to be working out well for us. Bridges, he keeps coming up. 13, 4, and 3 with a steal and 2 blocks. This was an interesting one. You know, normally I just look at this and write it off because of a blowout loss, but I don't think we should do that because Phoenix went to a point guard-less lineup for a while yesterday. Elie Okobo and Isaiah Cannon are the two traditional point guards that actually played in this game. They have a third one, but he didn't actually get into the ball game. And those two guys combined for about 36 minutes, which means there were 12 minutes where no traditional point guard was on the floor, and likely you would just say, okay, well, that was Devin Booker point guard time. Cool. If Devin Booker is the point guard, then who's the shooting guard? Ha-ha. See, that's where things get a little bit silly. Was it Jamal Crawford for those minutes? Maybe. Was it Trevor Ariza or Warren or Bridges? They didn't need to be too worried about it because they could just go with like 3 wing guys and a big man in those stretches, plus Devin Booker, as opposed to a point guard, Devin Booker, and 2 wing players. So this opens up more minutes for TJ Warren, for Bridges, for Ariza, all of these wing guys, including Josh Jackson, who, P.S., kind of sucks, have a big opening. Suddenly, an additional 12 wing minutes floating around. That's great news. That's great news for those guys. So Warren, Ariza, those guys are obviously in good shape. But with Bridges now, if they're really going to try to get him 25 minutes a night already, then he's a guy we should be watching like a hawk. This is earlier than any of us expected, but they're also a really bad team and not a whole lot to lose. So keep one eye on it. This hasn't been the case every single game. You know, he had a couple games in there where guys were hurt and he played more minutes. That was Warren out with the back stuff. Then TJ came back and Bridges' minutes dropped to 13 and 19, but he played 26 in this one. And don't tell me it's because some of these were blowouts and others were not, because they've basically all been blowouts. Phoenix is really bad. They play San Antonio in the next one. That's tomorrow, so we'll be watching that one to see what Bridges' numbers look like. And we'll go from there. Nothing of note on the Oklahoma City side, so we'll keep rumbling. Utah-Memphis, we were always watching Kyle Anderson, and every day he inches closer to being the guy we wanted. He had 7 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal in this game. That's the type of stuff we're looking for, just better than 3 for 11 shooting. And better than 1 for 2 at the free throw line. If you take those percentages out, it was actually a really good game for him yesterday. You can't just take the percentages out, so game was not as great. But still really good signs. He should be owned, and he should probably be started now, because it looks like he's hit that level of comfort in Memphis. Utah covered this game. This is one of the ones we mentioned as a potential revenge angle in yesterday's games, and it worked. Utah was a 4-point road favorite. They won that game by 8. Revenge is a weird thing, guys. It's a weird thing. You have to figure out if the team is sort of the right fit for it, and Utah did kind of fit that mold. Like teams that lose at home and then go on the road to play that same opponent, unless there's some weird matchup thing that dictated why it happened, usually you get a pretty good effort from that club the second time around. Derek Favors has been showing some signs of life lately. His full season numbers are still okay at best, but he's also available in actually a decent number of leagues. He's like a half. But he's clawed his way up to right around the top 100 in 9 category. He's been a top 60 guy over the last 2 weeks. So while I clowned on him a little bit early, his recent production largely in the defensive departments, his steals and blocks have come up lately, where that stuff was not as great before, and his field goal percent has been very good over that stretch as well, have pushed him into actually having full season value. So if you need a center, feel free to scoop him. I'm okay with it. Late round center, very much a late round center, but like let's say you have Taj Gibson and he's about to fall on hard times. We don't know. I think he's actually still going to get plenty of minutes because he's a Tibbs guy. But let's say he does fall out of the rotation a little bit in Minnesota. Favors would be a very good replacement for that. Slightly better field goal percent, slightly worse free throw. That stuff balances out. He also had 2 3-pointers while taking a scant 5 shots in 28 minutes yesterday. So that was odd. And also, Memphis has a tendency to play a little bit slow and a little bit lumbery, and so that works out well for Favors. This is a pretty good matchup for him by all accounts. The last time they played Memphis, he also had a couple of blocks. But yeah, here's the thing. Simple as this. He's not must own, but he should be owned. He's a should own. Like, you're not going to kill yourself if you don't have Derek Favors trotting out there every time for your lineup, because he's not blowing you away. He's at 7 rebounds, which is fine, but not outstanding. 1 steal, 1.3 blocks, just under a 3-pointer. He's doing his best, like, Danny Green impersonation here. So there's a reason for it, but I wouldn't go crazy. We just have to keep an eye on the other guys on your team. Maybe you rotate some guys out and take it as it comes. So he's someone to keep an eye on as well. Brooklyn, Minnesota. We're going to jump right over this game and come back to it as the last one because it is obviously the big story of last night. Dallas, Chicago. Oh, Dallas and their stupid rotations. Harrison Barnes settling in a little bit now, but otherwise you just got this mishmash. Total mishmash. DeAndre Jordan is trustworthy. Luka Doncic most nights. Matthews is out right now. But yeah, you guys know how little I care for Dallas most evenings. I do love Justin Holiday on the other side, though. There was nothing we were watching on the Chicago side of the ledger. I just love to point out how much I enjoy Justin Holiday and his insanely efficient fantasy game right now. You guys are going to be blown away by this. I want you to take a second while we're looking at this game to guess in your mind what Justin Holiday's 9-category ranking is. And I told you what it was yesterday. Well, it's gone up since then. He was at 41 when we did yesterday's show. Last night he went for 14 points, 3 boards, 2 steals, 3 3-pointers, and only 1 turnover on 5 out of 9 shooting, and he made his free throws as well. And he's now number 37. Justin Holiday is a top 40 fantasy asset this year, guys. I have him in a bunch of places. He's one of those guys that nobody believed was actually going to stay okay. I'm a little bit worried about Denzel Valentine coming back eventually, but, I mean, geez. He's playing the second most minutes on the team, so you do kind of have to roll with that. Sacramento beat San Antonio again. Bogdan was the guy we were watching, and he blew up for 22 points on a team-high 17 shots last night. These guys coming back from injury are doing it a lot faster than I expected. This was a battle of guys coming back from injury because Derek White had 11 and 5 on the San Antonio side. I'm enthused. I'm encouraged by both of those performances from guys that haven't been back even a week yet. Rudy Gay also back for San Antonio, so that's going to knock out a little bit of the usage for the other big guys on the Spurs. Just, LaMarcus Aldridge will do a little bit less. DeMar DeRozan will do a little bit less. Derek White will do a little bit less. Although, again, de facto point guard, assists don't grow on trees, so I think he should be owned. Bogdan does appear, of the two guys at least right now, to have the higher ceiling, although I don't think you can expect him to be that efficient most nights. It was pretty cool to see, though. He's already up to 25 minutes. He should be owned everywhere for the potential to be like a top 90 kind of guy. Derek White, more like a top 100 guy, but either way, pick those guys up that are in the double digits in rank off the waiver wire. That's a find. Meanwhile, Nemanja Bjelica, 11 points, 6 boards, a steal, and 3 3-pointers. Absolutely bought himself more time on your fantasy team. It's been a little bit of a downward trajectory for him, but good to see him logging decent minutes in this game. I'd love to see him take more shots and be a little bit more involved on the offensive side, but here we are. And, tough to complain. Like Buddy Hield, he actually got pushed out a little bit more than Bjelica did. The Spurs attempted to slow this game down, which also hurts the Kings a tad, but they were able to do enough, thanks largely to Bogdan. Old Bogdan. Clippers beat the Warriors in overtime. As Steph Curry goes, so go the Golden State Warriors. Steph is out. They lose again. Kevin Durant triple-double before fouling out. Klay Thompson had 31 points on 31 shots. And our Quinn Cook streaming did not work out particularly well for us yesterday, but it should tonight because the Warriors competition gets a little bit easier than Patrick Beverley. Boy, Beverley takes his job seriously, doesn't he? Goodness gracious. He didn't do anything on the offensive side, but he turned Quinn Cook into a pumpkin. Meanwhile, elsewhere for the Clippers, who only play overtime games now, Montrezl Harrell, 23 and 8. Another whopper of a game for him. Another game where Boban didn't log a minute. Oops. Yeah, you can't. It's fluky, guys. We've been down this road before. Marcin Gortat actually alive again. Played 20 minutes in this game, so that was something. Lou Williams had 25. Gilgeous-Alexander had 18 and 5 in this one. No three-pointers. He shot a robust 8 for 11 from the field and made both of his free throws. I know that I'm still sort of behind the curve on the Gilgeous-Alexander. There were some formats where I was looking to pick him up, but he had already been scooped. In a traditional 9-category format, he's been very good over his last 3 games, but there's something about the stat set that still leaves me a little bit concerned. I don't know what it is about the way that he's coming into these numbers that makes me feel like there's something unsustainable. And it's weird because I almost can't quite put my finger on it. And it's not like I dislike the kid. So I don't know why I have this odd aversion. Maybe it's because his name takes up the entire back of his jersey and then loops all the way around to the top of his buttocks. I think it's just because it's taking like a Thibodeau-level minute count to get to these numbers. What is it going to be like in a traditional 48-minute basketball game? He's going to play about 32 minutes. And, do the rebounding numbers come down from 5 to 3? Do the assists come down from 4 to 2? The steals and blocks? He does actually seem like such a long kid. He might be able to put up some blocks from that spot. I don't know that those are that fluky. But, are we talking about more like the season numbers here of 12, 3-3 with a little under a steal, a little under a block per game, and no three-pointers. Can he really shoot 49%? It's tough. I admit, like, my aversion to rookies might be the entire explanation for this, in that there really is no portfolio on this kid, and we've seen him play big minutes in games and do very little with them. So lately, to see him play big minutes and actually get involved in the offense is kind of cool and new, and I don't know if it's going to stick. Now, that being said, he's picked up pretty much everywhere at this point. So we're talking about a guy that's no longer on waiver wire, so it really doesn't matter what I say. But I do think that this is more the higher watermark for him. If you look at the last week, he's a top 50 guy. That's the high watermark. He's not going to average 2 blocks a game. He's not going to shoot 56% for the year. He doesn't take a ton of three-pointers. He doesn't rebound or assist all that much in an offense where there's just a ton of guys going around. So as those numbers pair back, I mean, he could very easily be a top 90, top 100 kind of guy the rest of the season. And so I don't know why I was so reticent to pick that up. You know, that's probably more useful or just as useful as a guy like a Wesley Matthews in a slightly different stat capacity. But what I'm saying is I don't think you guys are going to kill yourselves if you missed on him. I don't think he's going to be the pickup that changes fantasy leagues. I think his teammate Montrezl Harrell might be that guy because apparently the free throw stuff is leveled off and Montrez is still a monster because the other centers out there are awful. I think Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be helpful for your fantasy team, but I don't think he's going to be like a game changer. I don't think he's going to be a waiver wire pickup that's top 50 all year. But he should be on a team. Was that clear? I talked in a circle on that one a little bit. He should be on a team. If you missed him, it's not the end of the world. He's going to come back down from this point. There's a little bit of a sell high here if anybody in your league thinks he can keep up 19-5-5 or whatever these overtime games have been. But I doubt most people are going to buy into that. Last one to talk about here is obviously Brooklyn, Minnesota, because this is brutal. Almost a little bit of a moment of silence for Caris LeVert, who I spent 5 minutes on yesterday's podcast talking about the difference between a sell high and actually disliking a player. I dislike Dennis Smith Jr. from a fantasy perspective. He's terrible. Caris LeVert, we like, but was also overperforming. And now it doesn't matter because he snapped his ankle, likely, by all accounts, from what we know so far, which is not everything, to miss a lot of time. I believe the medical assessment is a dislocated foot. We have no idea what the timetable is. There was not a fracture somehow, which is crazy. So the bone actually just sort of came out of the socket instead of breaking, which by all accounts is actually a bit of good news on the Caris front, but it could still be, my guess would be months. But this is not an injury you see very often in the NBA. So I don't have an exact medical timeline on this from past cases, but I can't imagine that a dislocated foot is going to recover all that quick. There's going to be a lot of swelling there. Still, you don't make any moves with Caris immediately. This is a lesson that I think all of us have to learn at least one time in fantasy, is when somebody gets hurt really badly, you don't move them until after you know what the timeline is. And I had a team in one of my leagues that actually dumped him yesterday when they saw the injury. That could end up being a bad decision. We don't know. I mean, maybe it's February, in which case, yeah, you're probably dumping him because stashing a guy for 3 months is brutal, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a full year. So that's side number one. Side B of this article is, what does it mean for the rest of the guys on the Nets? Well, D'Angelo Russell seemingly now has a hell of a path to stuff. He had 31 points on 9 three-pointers in yesterday's game. And as much as I hate his fantasy game, there's very little standing in his way with Caris LeVert out. Despite that, by the way, despite the biggest game of like seemingly Russell's career, He's still just a top 85 fantasy player. That number is likely to come up. He's useful now. Despite the bad percentages, the volume is going to be so high that he will be useful. Spencer Dinwiddie gets a bump with Caris LeVert out, just because this is a ball handler situation now. LeVert is out. I don't care if Damari Carroll ends up in the starting lineup. They lost a playmaker, and they're going to replace his playmaking at some point along the way. Jared Allen also missed yesterday's ball game, so we have to take some of this with a slight grain of salt. That allowed Ed Davis to log way more minutes than usual. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson played 27 minutes in yesterday's game, which, again, remember, Caris played most of the first half before getting hurt. This was right around halfway through the ball game, and Jefferson had 14, 6, and 5 with 3 steals and a block. To me, he's a must-own player right now while we see how this shakes out. He's a playmaking forward, and they now need more playmakers they can slot into the offense. Guys like Carroll and Alan Crabb and Joe Harris, maybe they all get an extra shot or two out of this mix, but I don't think their values change as much as Hollis-Jefferson. He's the guy, for me, that goes from being someone people were dropping to someone that people are now picking up. Where, like, Russell was being held and Dinwiddie was largely being held, and Harris was on a lot of teams right now, and Crabb basically is still not, and Damari Carroll is not, and I don't think any of that stuff changes considerably. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is the one you're looking at, and you're thinking, okay, this is a guy that could get back over the cut line onto the good side of it, because things were bad for him, man. He's outside the top 200 so far this year, and he was on a stretch of playing a total of 48 minutes over 3 games. And then yesterday, he scored more in one game, or about the same, I should say, than the previous 3 games combined. And the steals were back, and he got a block, and the shooting percentage was better. There's just an opening now for him to be a part of the offense again. His usage rate is much higher when LeVert is not on the floor, and so this is a chance for him to sort of get comfortable. And again, we don't know what the timeline is on this, but like last year, Hollis-Jefferson played 28 minutes a game. He averaged 14, 7, 2.5, a steal, and a little bit less than a block. There is a universe where he could get pretty close to that, and that's a top 80 string of production. That's useful. That's top 80, top 90. So he should be on your team. Again, I don't know that he's going to be the guy that wins you a league, but he's going to be pretty useful for a little bit. Meanwhile, on the Minnesota side, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this because Saric and Covington were not yet there, but I did want to point out Derrick Rose logged the most minutes of anybody on the team, so I don't think he's the guy that should be worried. This was a classic Tibbs game, by the way. The starters all played 33 minutes or more. Nobody off the bench played more than 19 and a half minutes. Well, with 2 new bodies coming in, it'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out. You will hear, by the way, momentarily from our good friend Eric Goldman, and we'll talk about who will probably win out in this process. It's a really good segment. Let's jump into that now. But first, let me remind everybody, Hoopball DFS is coming in hot, ladies and gentlemen. It's coming in hot, ladies and germs. We got another Beat the Expert promo that's coming up tomorrow, the Wednesday Beat the Expert contest at DraftKings. We are tweeting out links to the competition, and we want all of you guys to get into the contest. There were, I think, 37 or 38 of you last week. We'd love to get all of you guys back in for week 2. It's the same principle. $3 entry, top 10 spots pay out $15 a piece, and the number 1 spot gets a Hoop Ball t-shirt on top of the cash. And by the way, where can you find this link? We're going to be tweeting it out at Dan Besbris, at Hoopball Fantasy, at Hoopball Tweets. The pro is Mike Apotria. Aaron Brewski will likely be in the tournament tomorrow as well. So, you can try to beat the Hoopball founder, which basically everybody did last week. And on top of that, there's a really cool way to get started, because if you open up a new DraftKings account through the Hoopball portal and put $10 in it, you get the premium membership for free. So do that. Go to hoop-ball.com, click on Premium, choose the Go Premium tab. It's Go Premium. And then among the list of options there, one of them is the free DraftKings promo. You click on that link. You navigate through that webpage, open up a new DraftKings account, put $10 in it, and you get the Hoop Ball in-season premium pass for the entire season as part of that package. And then with the $10 in your account, you can play this Hoop Ball Beat the Expert contest 3 weeks in a row. And if you win any of them, you end up money. You can cash out at that point. You can win extra money, maybe a Hoop Ball t-shirt, and get the premium membership. And all you got to do is place in the top 10 one of 3 times in this hypothetical scenario, and you end up getting the premium membership and getting money on top of it. That's a pretty good deal. Again, hoop-ball.com is the website, at hoopballfantasy, at Dan Besbris, at hoopballtweets is where you can check out all that stuff. Beat the Expert at DraftKings tomorrow. That's a Wednesday competition. Once again, we will remind you on tomorrow's show as well. Let's get into the interview. I had a feeling we'd be talking to you soon. Eric Goldman, welcome back, my man. Different circumstances this time.
Yes, we finally have a little resolution to one of our big Timberwolves issues, so it's always good to talk to you.
It is excellent to talk to you. This is Eric Goldman at Canis Hoopus. CanisHoopus.com is the website. He's been guiding us through the Jimmy Butler saga, which has now reached a conclusion of sorts. The big news, of course, over the weekend, Jimmy Butler sent to the Philadelphia 76ers in the big haul coming back. Rob Covington and Dario Saric. And, of course, this creates one of those little log jams we love so much because Jimmy Butler was basically a 2 or a 3. Covington is either a 3 or a 4, and Saric is basically just a 4. And so I got to know now, Eric, how this is going to play itself out. Here's the things that I feel like I do know. And I might be wrong about these two, but it feels like the things that feel safe right now is when healthy, Jeff Teague and Karl Anthony Towns are the 1 and the 5 on the Timberwolves. Am I at least okay on that front?
Yes, I think that is safe to say.
Okay, so that's the easy stuff.
I think the other safe thing to say is that Wiggins will start at one of the wing spots when he's healthy. And beyond that, there are question marks. I mean, my guess is that as things settle in, Covington will start at the other wing spot. But, it's possible that Tibbs sticks with Derrick Rose in the starting lineup next to Teague and brings Covington off the bench. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But my guess is he goes with Wiggins and Covington as the wings.
So let's explore that wing situation a little bit more. You've got Derrick Rose, who's kind of a Tibbs guy, and I think that's why you even mentioned the possibility of him staying in the starting lineup. Is Thibodeau loves him, and he does seem to actually have some explosion back this year. It doesn't seem quite so fluky now a couple weeks down the line. Wiggins is a guy who the Wolves have sunk a ton of money into, but then Rob Covington is, I mean, I don't want to say similarly sized to Wiggins because Andrew's sort of longer and leaner, and then Covington's more of a powerful one. But defensively, Covington is outstanding. He was one of Philadelphia's best defenders, if not their best defender, and that feels like the kind of thing that would play well in a Tom Thibodeau situation because historically he has been a little bit more defensive-minded. So all of that to say, and I know I'm sort of getting off topic here a tiny bit, let's say that it is Teague, Wiggins, Covington as sort of the first 3, the 1, the 2, and the 3. How many minutes do you think Wiggins and Covington could reasonably log? And then you mentioned Derrick Rose. Does he just soak up all of the extra 2 and 1 minutes out on the floor?
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen. One of the things that's happened up to now is that there have been enough sort of injuries, and also Butler just sitting out a few games. But Teague's been hurt, still is actually a game time decision tonight, but I don't think he'll go. Wiggins has had unusually a couple of small injury problems. He missed a couple games earlier. He's missed the last one. He's also a game time decision tonight. He's more likely to play, I think, tonight. And so there have been minutes for guys and Rose was sort of, when everybody was healthy, was playing more of the kind of backup shooting guard role. With Teague out, he's sort of transitioned back, and he's actually started at the point for the last few games with Teague out. And a rookie by the name of Josh Okogie has been getting playing time on the wing, even in the starting lineup, as both Wiggins and Butler have missed games. And he's been interesting as well, but that is really off topic. And in fact, I mean, Rose he's purely on court. He's been very hot from three to start the season, which is, very unusual. He's never been a good 3-point shooter. And, it's 40 some odd attempts, so it's a very small sample size. But he's been hot from three, which has to an extent mitigated some of the negatives. And Tibbs does love him. And so my guess is he'll find a way into playing time one way or another.
Eric, is there enough? Are there enough minutes for all three of those guys, Rose, Covington, and Wiggins?
Well, I think there's enough minutes for all three of those guys. And Wiggins, when he's healthy, will probably play 34 minutes a night or so. Covington, we haven't seen how he fits with everything. It's hard to say exactly
right.
What his playing times look like. But, 30 minutes for Covington. I mean, that leaves still, 32 backup wing minutes that have to be filled, which is more than enough for Derrick Rose, certainly, if you're using him purely on the wing. There's also the backup point guard, which is, which has been Tyus Jones's job. He's struggled some early this season, and we'll see how many minutes he hangs on to. There's there are always options to go small, get Covington some minutes at the 4, although there's a logjam there already, and it's not something Tibbs loves to do generally. So, I mean, it's hard to say, since we haven't seen these new guys in Wolves uniforms yet, how the combinations are going to fit together. And one of the things that I wrote about today on the website is that, they have to experiment. They've got to try different combinations out, see what works, see what doesn't. It's not really about this year anymore. They're 4-9, and they just traded their best player. So, it's not, and both Covington and Saric look like they're going to be around for at least the next couple of years. So you've got to start trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, what different combinations you can find that work, with the guys who are going to be around going forward after this season, which, leads us into, Derrick Rose is not under contract for next season. Taj Gibson will be a free agent this summer. Jeff Teague has a player option for next year. So, how you balance kind of playing those guys who are going to be free agents, but who might be in a position to help you win, versus doing some experimenting with guys that are going to be around next season is, a big question for the Wolves going forward. And, one of the worrisome things about Thibodeau, who tends to be stubborn and not particularly experimental, and also wants to win right now, largely, because that's who he is, but also because any chance he has to retain his job after the season depends on it.
So that actually leads me into my next topic, which is the power forward spot, which suddenly becomes a little bit murky because Rob Covington has played some stretch 4 in his time in the past. He's a very strong man on the wing that can handle that spot when teams go small. Perhaps that opens things up a little bit for his minutes. But this is a spot that's seen a lot of Taj Gibson and a little bit of Anthony Tolliver, and now has a guy coming in Dario Saric, who's pretty accustomed to playing, I guess you could say 26 to 31-ish, somewhere in that neck of the woods minutes for the 76ers. How does that big man spot shake itself out? Because we know Cat is locked into 34 some odd 35 minutes at center, but power forward seems a little murky right now.
Yeah, it really does, and it will be interesting to see. I mean, my guess is, for the moment anyway, in the short term, Gibson will remain the starter. Again, it's not something where Tibbs is just going to throw somebody he's never worked with into the starting lineup. It wouldn't shock me if the way this shakes out is that Gibson, while retaining the starting spot, actually winds up playing a significant number of his minutes as the backup 5.
Okay.
Open up more minutes for Saric at the 4.
Does that push anybody? Does that mean that Gorgie?
Yeah, it pushes Gorgie Jang kind of
to 0
out of the rotation. He's been backing up Towns, and it's been a tough go for him.
It almost feels like Thibodeau made this deal just so he could officially just bench Gorgie Jang completely.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. He is such an incredible human being, Jang. And he was playing quite well. He and Towns actually started together for a couple of seasons. And he wound up parlaying that into a big extension, and then he stopped getting minutes. It was sort of like
it's weird.
It was sort of like sudden they signed him to this extension a couple of summers ago, and then they signed Taj Gibson. Gibson takes the power forward spot. Towns is locked in at center. All of a sudden, Gibson is just the backup 5 to a guy who's gonna for a coach who plays his starters heavy minutes, and he really struggled with it last year. His minutes were way down, and his production wasn't great. And he's looked a little bit better this year, but still not playing a ton. And so, I don't know that that's what they'll do, but it wouldn't shock me if that's sort of how it plays itself out. Truth be told, I mean, one of the things that I would look at if I'm the Wolves, though I don't really expect them to do this because Thibodeau is still at least somewhat in charge of personnel, is there are guys who can be moved between now and the deadline, right? I mean, I would consider, there've got to be teams who would be interested in Taj Gibson, right? On an expiring, who doesn't have any salary commitment past this year, but who could help you defensively, down low for a playoff run this year. Anthony Tolliver, who can't be traded until December, but still, a stretch 4 who can really shoot it. I mean, but if you're the Wolves, you want Tolliver getting any minutes in place of Saric? I don't think so. I mean, not given the roster situation. So, if Derrick Rose's rejuvenation continues, then maybe somebody wants him. I mean, I think you have to look at it that way, or at least I would if I were the Wolves. Are there any other deals that I can make? Not necessarily huge ones, but maybe I get a couple of, future picks somehow out of my veterans that I probably can't afford to re-sign next year.
Could this be a weird situation, Eric, where the removal of arguably the team's most impactful player makes them better just because the situation is finally resolved?
Well, I think to an extent. I think that, yeah. They've been playing particularly poorly. It's been ugly.
Yes, it has.
And look, they won 47 games last year with largely the same cast of characters. Obviously, things were way off start this year. This situation was not helping anybody. And so, just having some stability, I think, will help out. On the other hand, I don't want to minimize how good Jimmy Butler is. He's fantastic. And I don't know that you get better by trading him. It's I think the stability will help, and hopefully they can just, move forward with effort and focus now in a way that they haven't been able to over the first month of the season. But talent-wise, look, they lost an all-NBA level guy. And while he was maybe not playing his best, he still was, doing things when he played that nobody else on the team can do. And so, I'm now obviously looking forward to the rest of the season and seeing what transpires and seeing how guys fit and all of the stuff that, we as fans and, people who pay attention love to do. And just having this situation, resolved is, makes being a fan and much easier in a lot of ways. I'm not expecting miracles. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it sounds like what I'm gathering from you is it's almost similar to like when a team goes through a coaching change where there's this initial bump, everybody plays a little harder, and then reality kind of sets in and things get difficult because, damn, it's a long NBA season and it's really hard to play sort of above your normal level of energy for more than a couple weeks at a time. A little bit of a lightning round thing for you, Eric, here before we wrap up this segment. Just now from the fantasy standpoint, because that's what a lot of folks are wondering on this podcast. Who goes up, who goes down? I'm just going to run through all the names we just talked about, and you tell me up, down, or no change. So I'm throwing you in the hot seat for a sec.
Okay.
Derrick Rose.
No change, largely because he's probably been playing a little bit over his head recently. But the minutes will definitely be there for him.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought on that one. Andrew Wiggins.
Up. He'll get more opportunities with the ball, which has proved a mixed bag from a wins and losses standpoint, but from a standpoint, once he's healthy, up.
I like that. Rob Covington come to town. I got to assume he's a down.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is he gets. His minutes, at least initially, are not where they were in Philly, and maybe his usage has been low in Philadelphia, so I'm not sure how much lower it's going to go. But my guess is I wouldn't count on him for heavy minutes until we see how things shake out over the next few weeks.
We'll go to the other Philly guy. How about Dario Saric?
I would assume down. I mean, he's played poorly to start the season, but he's also played 30-plus minutes a night, and I don't think we'll see that, at least initially, for the Wolves.
Yeah, I thought so, too. Finally, Taj Gibson.
Probably down because he will probably lose some minutes. Saric has to play some.
Gotcha. Perfect. Eric Goldman of Canis Hoopus, my man, thank you for coming back on. The third time's the charm. We got a trade this time.
Thank goodness. Finally relax a little bit. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Anytime, happy to join you.
That was our good buddy Eric Goldman breaking down the up, the down, the sideways on the Minnesota side of the big Jimmy Butler trade. Quickly here on this evening, we're going to make this one lightning fast because we're coming up on a time limit. Just a 3-game card on Tuesday. Charlotte, Cleveland. 8.5-point spread. Don't want anything to do with that one. Houston catching 4 in Denver. I do kind of like the Rockets a little bit in this game. Denver a little overvalued. They're scuffling right now. Houston's starting to find a little bit of a groove. Golden State by 12.5 over the Atlanta Hawks. No idea what the hell is going to happen in this game. From a fantasy standpoint, of course, we're watching the Cleveland Cavaliers to find out who the hell is going to play tonight. Yes, indeed. Houston, there's been a little bit of Gary Clark buzz. We'll put him on the watch list, but I don't think we're getting anywhere yet. And then Atlanta, can Taurean Prince keep it going? Golden State, pretty predictable. Quinn Cook, is he ready to do the streaming thing that we wanted so badly to happen last night? No homework, but if I had to assign some, it would be all 3. It's a 3-game night. You can watch all of them. Thanks for listening, everybody. Big thanks again to our buddy Canis Hoopus, at Canis Hoopus on Twitter. He's Eric Goldman. Please do check out the Beat the Expert promo this week. We want you all back for round 2. This is Fantasy NBA Today, a hoopball presentation on Dash Radio. I'm Dan Besbris. Have a lovely Tuesday. Back tomorrow with Ben Vasconcelos to tell us about the Washington Wizards. So long.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.